Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Bailey. I'm one of the co-founders of From Day One, which is a forum on corporate values. In today's webinar, we're going to be exploring a pivotal topic, which is 4 steps to empowered managers. How effective are your managers? Using data from the latest manager empowerment report from the Achievers Workforce Institute, this session is going to explore the untapped potential of people managers. What areas can have the most impact, and how can you ensure your organization is empowering managers to be more effective every day? You're going to learn how you can take steps today to improve results for every employee across the organization. You'll be hearing from workforce science expert, Dr. Natalie Baumgartner, and employee engagement evangelist, Brie Harvey. They're going to talk about their latest findings and some of their top suggestions. So without further ado, I'll be passing it on to them. And our sponsor today is Achievers. And please welcome Brie Harvey and Dr. Natalie Baumgartner.
Thank you, Nick. We're so happy to be here. As mentioned, I'm Brie Harvey, and I've been working at Achievers for about the last 6 years. I started my career in talent acquisition before transitioning to the training and development side of the house. But in my current role as an employee engagement evangelist, I get to write and speak about trends in employee motivation and the future of work. And like all of you, I'm a human with so much more complexity and layers than beyond my job. So I'll quickly share that when I'm not obsessing over employee engagement, I love to travel. I've been to over 70 countries. Many of them I've visited on a solo 2 year around the world backpacking trip I did before joining Achievers. But these days I've been trying to keep myself busy with hobbies that get me out of the house. Lately, I've been running. Last month, I did over 100 miles, mostly listening to HR podcasts. So if you have recommendations, please send them my way. And I couldn't be any more thrilled to introduce my co-host for today, Dr. Natalie Baumgartner. Dr. Natalie has a PhD in clinical psychology and more than 20 years of experience in researching and consulting on culture and engagement. At Achievers, she's our chief workforce scientist and leads the research arm of Achievers, the Workforce Institute, which we'll talk about more in a second. If you haven't seen her TED Talk, you may have come across her work before, as she's a regular contributor to Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and many other publications. Dr. Natalie, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. Tell us a fun fact about you. I know you have a lot.
Thank you, Brie. I'm delighted to be here talking with you again and with all of our listeners about what's a very timely topic. So let's see, first though, a fun fact. Well, when I'm not nerding out on all this engagement science, I stay pretty busy with my 3 little girls. We love to travel too as a family. They've been to, I think, about coming on 10 countries now too. And so that's a huge passion of ours. But this year it's been a little bit different. And luckily they're true Coloradoans. That's where we live in Boulder, Colorado. And they love to keep me running up mountains or leaving me in their dust on the ski slope whenever there's a free minute. So I'm just trying to keep up.
I love that. And her girls are so adorable. I love when they make Zoom cameos. There's nothing cuter than seeing little speed demon kids mash down the slopes. I used to be just like that, like no fear, going off all the jumps. I was actually pretty good at jumping, but I never got down the whole landing part, hence some broken bones. But okay, now more fun stuff. Quick overview of how we're going to spend our time together. We'll start by contextualizing the conversation by sharing where a lot of the research we'll be talking about came from and who the Workforce Institute is, share a little bit about the methodology of the actual report we'll be covering today. But we're going to spend a bulk of our time together exploring some of the high impact ways HR can empower managers to be more effective and influence the engagement and performance of their teams. We'll wrap it up with some key takeaways before we open the floor to take some questions. Natalie, how about we start at the beginning and have you give us a quick overview of what the Workforce Institute is and what makes it unique from other research outlets?
Great, Brie. So the Workforce Institute, like Brie mentioned, is the science and research arm of Achievers. And by design, we're a cross-functional team of really passionate leaders in data science and product, customer success, marketing, and more. And we all work together to bring a workforce science focus to everything that we do here at Achievers. There are two main outputs of the Workforce Institute. The first is thought leadership. We translate academic and business research into digestible, usable insights that we then share through articles and outlets like Forbes and Harvard Business Review, and also through our own Workforce Institute insight papers and reports. And our goal is to make workforce science accessible to all business leaders. The second key area of output for the Workforce Institute is a focus on guiding the development of Achievers products. All of our technology and services are built on a foundation of rigorous science, and that means that they evolve as science does. So to answer your question about what sets the Workforce Institute apart from other research houses within tech companies, I think it's the fact that we truly begin with science in an effort to advance our mission to change the way the world works. We're not simply checking the box on science with stats and benchmarks. We are constantly challenging ourselves to examine the unexamined and to leap ahead on enhancing engagement, but with science as our foundation.
Absolutely. And what I love about the Workforce Institute is that the findings and models are evolving as the science does. And I really appreciate how committed you've been from the very beginning to make all your work available for free and without restriction. Now, let's talk about the most recent publication, the Manager Empowerment Report, which we will share the link to shortly. What can you tell us about the methodology?
Ah, well, we had big questions, and so we needed a robust group of participants. We surveyed more than 2,000 people from 8 different countries. So this is a really rich report with strong statistical significance, which was important to us. Everybody surveyed is currently employed, and we had a range of seniority levels, which strengthens then the validity of our study and the findings within the report.
Yeah, and I love it. I know that this was a long time in the making for you and your team because COVID kind of jammed some things up. So it's really exciting that it's been released into the world and we're finally having this conversation. So before we get into the meat and potatoes, we should probably clarify what we mean when we talk about manager effectiveness. The Workforce Institute defines manager effectiveness as the measure of whether a manager is having a consistent positive impact on their team, specifically whether they're driving business results and what the attrition and engagement levels look like within their team. The old saying that people don't leave companies, they leave managers is cliche for a reason. When you look at the body of research on the topic, it's undeniable that a person's relationship to the manager can massively impact not just their engagement, but their overall quality of life. And if there's one thing that's become apparent since the pandemic, it's that managers hold the keys to our businesses now more than ever. What's concerning, however, is that a lot of organizations aren't measuring manager effectiveness, as there's no universal or standardized way of how to measure it. Obviously, there is a multitude of factors that contribute to manager effectiveness, as we'll dive into shortly. However, for the purposes of this study, we used a Net Promoter Score question, or NPS, which simply asked employees whether they would recommend their manager to peers. So, as we go through the findings and we talk about high or low manager effectiveness, that's the overall metric we're referring to, whether they'd recommend their manager. Very important to kind of level set about that. So, now that we've laid out the basic foundation of manager effectiveness and how we measured it, let's switch gears and explore the connection between manager effectiveness and engagement. Dr. Natalie, I know that this has been a central part of your research for a long time. Tell us what we learned from the report.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to share this data with all of you. So let's talk about what we're looking at here on the screen. The graphs that you see compare manager effectiveness to employee engagement. On the left side of the chart, you can see that 70% of people who would recommend their manager are very engaged. If you compare that to the right side, these are the people who would not recommend their manager. And only 15% of those individuals are very engaged. So there's clearly a stark contrast between the two groups of respondents. And it's one that supports our models and our hypothesis regarding the extent to which manager effectiveness impacts employee engagement. The chart clearly points to the importance of finding ways to measure, maintain, and improve manager effectiveness, given its direct impact on employee engagement. Engagement that we know is a significant driver of greater workplace productivity and lower levels of talent turnover.
Absolutely. And I listen to so many HR podcasts and I read so much. I can't remember where I heard this, but it always stuck with me that employee engagement impacts every single business metric a company would expend time or resources to measure in the first place. And to your point, Natalie, if manager effectiveness is such a significant driver of it, the question really is, what can be done to improve manager effectiveness? And when you look at the studies, it really all boils down to manager empowerment. We've all heard about manager empowerment, but it's so much more than a buzzword. When you create an environment where managers have the tools, resources, and opportunities to unleash their potential as a leader, when your managers genuinely have permission to make decisions and feel accountable for the motivation and engagement of their people, and when they truly understand that it is their responsibility for executing the strategic priorities of the business, it can be absolutely transformative. So, Natalie, let's talk about the AWI's manager empowerment model and how it guided the report.
Great. Well, as part of the research process, the Achievers Workforce Institute, or AWI, as Brie said, we really scoured the academic literature to identify the main drivers, the 4 pillars of manager empowerment. And we're going to be examining these in more detail, but in short, the pillars are manager contact, that crucial, meaningful face time between manager and direct report, recognition, regularly taking the time to show appreciation for team members' contributions, professional development. Everybody wants to know they have a career, not just a job. And finally, coaching. That process of bringing the best out of people by providing them with real-time, insightful coaching and support. These are the manager empowerment factors. Now, although there's a wealth of both academic and experiential data that support the massive importance of having managers drive these factors, very few organizations are empowering their managers to deliver on them. Specifically, what you see here on this slide tells us that we as a business arena are missing out on a key opportunity to train our managers to deliver on several key engagement levers. We asked managers what training they'd received in these areas, and less than half reported having been trained in even one of the key focus areas. In fact, only a third of managers reported receiving training across all 6 engagement levers. I was really struck by this piece of data as it begs the question, how can senior leaders expect managers to be successful if they're not offering training in crucial leadership areas? Now, as we'll see in the next section of the presentation, the top 4 categories listed here in this graph are those that are most critical for manager empowerment: one-on-one meetings, coaching, recognition, and development. And only a third of responding managers reported having been trained to effectively deliver either meaningful recognition or professional development. So all in all, there is a clear call to action here for HR: the introduction of specific, consistent training for all levels of managers, empowering them to lead their teams to success.
Here, here, as someone who spent most of their career on the training side of the house, I couldn't agree more. So many friction points in business really come down to a lack of consistent training. So shout out for all the L&D folks out there, because you are doing Such important work. Now, let's talk about how leveraging technology can elevate manager empowerment. One thing the survey revealed that's reassuring is that most managers claim they would be happy to adopt technologies that could help them be a better manager. The appetite is there. The question, however, HR has the burden, or rather the opportunity to deal with, is what tools are the right ones for your unique organization. Think about your email box right now. What percentage of people reaching out are trying to sell you on another tool? The market is oversaturated with technology solutions, for one thing. But then when you finally pull the trigger on this shiny new tool, I know firsthand from my previous role how difficult it can be to get leaders and managers using them. So, one of the most important considerations to ensuring a new technology is adopted and ultimately optimized involves making sure it meets an immediate need for both the organization and the manager. Just because your CFO wants managers to adopt a new tool because she thinks it will help with one of her strategic priorities doesn't mean that managers will care. If people don't see the what we call WIFM, it's an acronym that stands for what's in it for me, it's almost impossible to get sustained adoption for anything. Natalie, I know you have a good example about this. Why don't you talk a little bit about data and how Achievers is empowering managers with real time information?
Oh, I'd love to. It's a topic that's really near and dear to my heart because I think it's impossible to make good decisions without good data. I mean, pause for a minute and ask yourselves, what type of data are your managers receiving? Typically, the only data managers receive regarding their own performance is during one-to-one meetings with their own manager, and then perhaps through direct feedback from their team members. That data delivery approach is compromised because the level above often doesn't have insight into how the team below the manager is feeling. And that team, those individual team members, they're often not comfortable providing constructive feedback to their boss. Now, some organizations do conduct skip level meetings, which can add a layer of confidentiality to identify problem areas, but that's still not that commonplace today. So, one way that Achievers is working to give managers the feedback within our own company that they need to improve in their roles is by incorporating manager empowerment questions into our quarterly pulse surveys through our Listen platform. In the latter half of 2020, we added 4 manager empowerment questions to our quarterly engagement survey based on the Workforce Institute's manager empowerment model. Now, those questions provide employees with an opportunity to offer confidential feedback to their managers in a safe space. Managers can then take that feedback and act on it. And as we know, taking action on survey results is critical to drive both engagement and ongoing survey participation. At the Workforce Institute, we always say there's no such thing as survey fatigue, only inaction fatigue. So the final point of focus here is training. We've already talked a bit about the importance of training, but I wanted to emphasize that there are so many technological solutions out there to help you scale your training. Whether you invest in a program such as LinkedIn Learning or even just create and record training sessions so new managers can watch them as they adjust to their new role. Achiever's own employee success team conducts regular leadership training sessions. And one of the great pieces of feedback we've received based on the follow-up that we've done around our pulse survey changes is that managers experience those development sessions as really helping to empower them in these key areas.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate that training upon launch of a new tool is like obviously important, but it's really all about having a continuous training plan in place. So, as you mentioned, Natalie, when new people join or people get promoted, or maybe existing managers are like looking for resources or tools to help them up level their skills, those training opportunities are there. So now we're going to dive right into the 4 high impact areas to empower managers, starting with manager contact, but before we get too deep into it, we're gonna play a fun little game, a guessing game in the form of a poll. It should be popping up on your screen in a second. But basically, some years ago, Gallup did a study where they asked over 100 people about how their manager gave them feedback, and then they mapped those responses to employee engagement levels. The poll displaying on your screen now basically shows the three options people had to choose from in the survey. We want you to guess which of the following would be the most disengaged. That is, which group would be the most unhappy at work based off the answers they selected. Do you think the most disengaged employees would be those who A, reported their managers mostly focused on their strengths, or do you think the most disengaged group would be B, those who reported their managers mostly focused on their weaknesses, or C, do you think the most dissatisfied cohort would be the ones who read both those options and selected neither? Again, we're asking you your best guess for which of these three groups you think would be the most likely to be disengaged. We're going to give people a few seconds to answer. I love this question. I used to use it in trainings because it kind of seems straightforward, but then you start second guessing yourself. Okay, we're gonna give it a 4, 3, 2, 1. Kristen, let's check out our results. Oh my gosh, over half of you picked neither. Okay, I feel like I gave it away when I was like, oh, it seems straightforward. Okay, so 40% picked that the people who said, oh, my manager mostly focuses on my weaknesses, that they would be the most disengaged. Over half picked the people who said neither. However, I got to be honest, when I first came across this study, I thought it was the middle one. I thought the most disengaged group would be the people who felt like their manager mostly focused on their weaknesses, because it's like, who wants to be told what they're doing wrong all the time? However, when you look at the results, it was actually those who felt ignored that were twice as likely to be disengaged than the people who felt their managers mostly focused on their weaknesses. Dr. Natalie, you probably already knew that one because you're quite smart.
I did not know that one. But it does speak to this topic that we're really focused on, which is how important it is for managers to be really paying attention and to be invested in how their direct reports are doing, to really care.
100%. I love this example because it really demonstrates how catastrophic a lack of manager contact can be, not just to manager effectiveness, but as we saw, overall engagement. The US Department of Health recently released a report that showed when cortisol levels, our principal stress hormone, are heightened for prolonged periods of time, like they have been, it affects not just our motivation levels, but our desire to connect with others when we're struggling. And when you combine this with the fact that a lot of people may be feeling the pangs of social isolation from extended work from home arrangements, or anxiety from the tumultuous socio-political situation, it has never been more important for managers to check in with employees regularly on a one-to-one basis. Now, Natalie, obviously, manager one-on-ones have been a discussed topic even prior to the pandemic. And I know you and your team were very deliberate when designing the survey so that you could capture both what quality and optimal cadence looks like for manager one-on-one. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about what the report uncovered.
Yeah, I'm happy to, because there are multiple elements that contribute to successful one-on-ones. So we looked at a number of factors. We looked at both quantity and quality. And in the purple chart, we've displayed how employees rate the quality of their meetings and whether they recommend their manager. And as you can see, Those who recommended their manager are significantly more likely to say that they're satisfied with their meetings. Only 4% in that group report being dissatisfied with their one-on-one meetings, whereas employees who would not recommend their manager, they're far more likely to be dissatisfied with those one-on-one meetings. In fact, 59% in that group report being dissatisfied. So that's a huge difference. And it, I think, really speaks to the importance of quality one-on-ones when it comes to manager effectiveness. Now, in the orange chart, we're looking at the quantity of one-to-one meetings and how that impacts effectiveness. Again, you can see that those that recommend their manager are also highly likely to be satisfied with how often they meet one-on-one. And in comparison, less than half of those who wouldn't recommend their manager are satisfied with the frequency of those meetings. So what's the takeaway from these charts? Well, simply put, that both quantity and quality of one-to-one meetings matters. Managers need to be meeting regularly with their direct reports, but they also need to be focusing on ensuring that those meetings are of high quality, that they're meaningful.
Exactly. So, and like the question is, what is meaningful? What does a high quality meeting look like? The report asked employees what typically is covered in their one on ones. And as you can see from the chart, going over tasks and informal conversation top the list. Now, contrary to what some might assume, there is a time and a place for status updates, but it really shouldn't be during one on ones. The challenge is that some managers may be feeling out of the loop because opportunities for employees to organically share kind of impromptu status updates at the water cooler have kind of largely been removed, and we're not all engaging in idle chit chat in the hallways the way we did before. So it's really tempting to fill those one on ones with kind of surface level exchanges. But the value of those conversations for employees is actually really low. At the end of the day, one on ones are for the benefit of employees and should be aimed at lifting them out of their day to day as much as possible and succeed in their role and progress beyond their role. So the fact that half of employees are discussing performance objectives, professional development, or recent accomplishments in one on ones represents a really big missed opportunity. Natalie, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's first important to remember that most managers truly care about their people and they want to do a good job, but they often just lack awareness or insight into what they should be covering during those critical meetings. And the good news is that I think this gap is relatively easily addressable through training. When HR provides managers with training on what a successful one-to-one meeting looks like, managers can then adapt to suit each individual on their team. Now, best in class practice is to start with a positive, recognizing the team member for recent great contribution, and then covering off on what's working right now for the team member and where they need help accomplishing their day-to-day work. The next area of focus should touch on progress or needs relative to an employee's personal goals, along with the same focus on their professional objectives. And each of those meetings should then be brought to a close with the top 2 to 3 actions that need to be taken following the meeting to make sure things really go from data into action. Providing managers with an agenda like this gives them a framework to ensure that they're hitting on all of the key points at each meeting, which makes for a really thoughtful and consistent experience, both for managers and their team members.
Yeah, and on that point, I think that the concept of empowerment is equally important to extend to frontline employees who need to understand that it's also their responsibility to reflect on what would be the most useful for them to talk about. Like, that's their time to get the support and the development they need. So definitely encourage managers to set the expectation with their people that it kind of goes both ways and both parties need to take ownership over ensuring their one-on-ones are a good use of time. Okay, now that we've talked about the role of regular contact and how to optimize one-on-ones, we're going to explore the third key area that predicts manager effectiveness, and it has to do with one of my favorite topics, employee recognition. Over the last 2 decades, a mountain of evidence has accumulated showing how fundamentally important recognition is, not just to building highly engaged teams, but reinforcing key behaviors and aligning employees to core values. I think it was Harvard Business Review that said like 10 years ago that recognition is the simplest and most powerful way to boost morale and improve retention, and it costs nothing. But even without looking at all of the data linking recognition to high performance, the concept is really intuitive to us because being seen and feeling valued is an intrinsic emotional need that we all have as humans. If I'm working my tail off and the people around me routinely make me feel like no one's noticing, it's only a matter of time before I lose steam and I start emotionally distancing myself. That's where cynicism and disengagement are born. Conversely, there's not one person on the call that could argue against the fact that if someone is working in an environment where their contributions are regularly appreciated in an authentic way, they're going to be more energized to do a good job and find meaning in their work and feel a sense of belonging towards the people around them. So this link between recognition and engagement, it's become simply indisputable. And so the question is no longer, are we suffering from a lack of recognition in the workplace? The question really is, what's the best way to go about closing the recognition gap? Natalie, I'd love for you to share a bit about what the report revealed about the link between recognition and manager effectiveness ratings.
All right. Well, hopefully you're getting used to this chart format. So let's dive into what this one is telling us. On the left are people who would recommend their manager, and on the right are people who would not. The vertical y-axis then denotes responses to the question, my manager regularly provides me with recognition that makes me feel valued. On the left side, you can see that 95% of those who would recommend their manager agree with that statement, compared with just 31% on the right. So recognition clearly plays an important role in manager effectiveness. As Brie mentioned, a wealth of research exists that demonstrates just how important recognition is in driving engagement, satisfaction, productivity, and lower levels of turnover. The results that we see here align really well with those previous findings, and they add to that strong body of research that speaks to the impact of recognition. Okay, now I want to draw your attention to the question we asked because I think there's a nuance here that's worth noting. What we found is that it's not only important that managers provide regular recognition, it's also critical that the quality of those recognitions make employees feel valued. Although most recognition has net positive effects, not all recognition is created equal. And after partnering over the past 2 decades with some of the world's largest and most complex organizations on their recognition strategies, we've confirmed that in order for recognition to have the maximum impact, it must include several specific characteristics.
Yeah, and at Achievers, we talk about these characteristics all the time because we know when recognitions are frequent, public, timely, and specific and values-based, research shows that's where the magic happens. So it wasn't surprising that the report revealed the strongest kind of predictor of manager effectiveness was the recency of the last recognition the employee received. Kind of based off the last 2 decades of customer data we've analyzed, we would postulate that this correlation can actually be attributed to a lot more than just the recency effect. The sad reality leaders need to face is the benefits of recognition we just discussed are a lot shorter than previously assumed 15 years ago. Studies show recognition is a short-term need that has to be satisfied on an ongoing basis to work. Recognizing someone once or twice a year is better than nothing, but it's not enough to move the needle on the employee experience. In fact, nothing in life works if it's not frequent. Learning a new language, training a dog, I'm telling you, the employers with the most successful recognition strategies in the world empower their managers with the tools and technology so that recognizing their people frequently is simple, easy, and quick. And I promise you, the companies that are leveraging culture as a competitive advantage are the same ones continuously educating and reminding managers that it is their job to regularly call out the good work that's being done around them. When managers have caught on to the reality that what gets recognized gets repeated, when managers understand that recognition is the most powerful tool they have to motivate employees and align their people to key behaviors, it literally changes everything. Now, one thing I should clarify is we're not saying managers should arbitrarily recognize all the people all the time. That's definitely not recommended.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I even see that we had a comment in the chat from Lisa who said, I've been at organizations that had so much recognition that it almost became worthless or felt forced at times. And that's really important. When we talk about the importance of recognition frequency, many people picture a scenario where everyone gets a trophy and they imagine managers doling out, all this praise, some or much of which might be meaningless, which actually helps no one. We agree, Lisa, because as we've discussed, praise that lacks substance doesn't have the intended impact. And actually, it can be demotivating, which is what I heard from that comment. And we see that as well, which is why we recommend that in addition to empowering managers to recognize often, we also must set the expectation that recognition has to be specific and include details about what exactly the person did to earn that recognition. And equally important is that recognition should be timely. Research shows that the more time that passes between an exhibited behavior and the receipt of a recognition, the lower the impact that recognition will have. And last, or almost last, recognition should have a public or social component recognition should be shared beyond a manager and their direct report alone. While we know that a private thank you is certainly nice, a public recognition in front of peers and company leaders is typically far more motivating. And last, recognitions should be values-based. If your organization is looking to drive values-based behavior to align your culture, then it's important to provide values-based recognition. Because as Brie mentioned, and I did as well, what gets recognized gets repeated. And so we need to be focusing on values in that context as well.
Yeah. And what gets recognized gets repeated, especially, Lisa, when it's specific, timely, and public. You really double down on that, aligning employees to those behaviors. And as a way to thank all of you who tuned in to the broadcast live today, we're offering an exclusive book giveaway from New York Times best-selling author Chester Elton's latest book, Leading with Gratitude, signed by Chester himself. It's a phenomenal book. As you can see, mine is just loaded with markups because it is just packed full of real world examples from some of the world's top employers of how to get employee recognition right. You can redeem for that by clicking on the link that we're going to provide you in the chat and the follow-up email. And as a little spoiler alert, Dr. Natalie and I will be back with From Day One on the 1st of April with the author of the book, Chester Elton himself, for a virtual book club kind of exclusive fireside chat where we'll be talking about how to apply some of the main concepts from the book. So make sure you subscribe to the Workforce Institute's mailing list for that exclusive announcement. Very exciting. So now it's time to move along to our next area for enhancing manager effectiveness, which is professional development. And It's no secret that people centric organizations have long understood that focusing on employee development directly fuels engagement, loyalty, and really just serves as a powerful signal that the company values its people. One of the primary reasons I'd postulate that a person treats their job like a temporary stepping stone and just not care about it is because the organization and their frontline manager in particular has failed to help them see opportunities to grow within their current role or the company. So it wasn't a shocker that people who would recommend their managers were 33% more likely to claim their managers discussed professional development with them. What's concerning, however, is findings from the Workforce Institute's 2020 Culture Report suggests that employee development is an area organizations have been kind of tapping the brakes on since the pandemic. And the reality HR has to own up to is that some employees may be feeling disillusioned or slighted if there were components of their compensation or benefits or perks that were temporarily removed as we're all in austerity mode. So it has never been more important to help employees see the bigger picture and show them how valued they are by investing in their development. Natalie, I'd love to have you unpack what the report uncovered about the link between manager effectiveness and development.
Sure. So in this chart, we're looking at manager effectiveness compared to whether the manager supports professional development goals. And as you can see, there's a big difference here between effective managers on the left and ineffective managers on the right. For effective managers, almost everyone, 96%, said they agreed that they felt supported in their professional development. Compare that to just 33% of those without effective managers. That's a tremendous difference and really speaks to just how critical professional development is for employees. And as we mentioned, when we asked whether employees talked about professional development in their one-to-one meetings, only a third said that that was the case. That means that this very important driver of engagement was missed for 2/3 of the employees in our study. In fact, as you can see on this next chart, those who would not recommend their manager are more than twice as likely to say that their manager has never discussed professional development with them. Never. This difference is even more striking when we look at disengaged respondents, who are 3 times more likely than engaged respondents to say that their manager has never discussed professional development with them.
Yeah. And when we think about how these findings should translate into action, we would be remiss to acknowledge that obviously building out a comprehensive approach to employee development involves more than just manager involvement. However, these results suggest one of the most effective and low cost things you can do to bridge the gap, especially right now when disillusionment and burnout are on the rise, is to ensure managers understand it is their responsibility to continuously initiate conversations with their people about their future goals. HR and leaders within the organization need to communicate to managers that the best things in life continue to be free and people still don't leave companies. They leave bad bosses that don't make them feel supported in their growth. So, yeah, managers have to understand that they hold the keys to your business now more than ever, and their success as a leader is a direct reflection of their ability to make their people feel like they care about their growth and they value them as a person, which this kind of parlays nicely into the fourth and final high impact area to manager effectiveness, and it has to do with coaching. So, over the last couple of years, there's been loads of articles and books exploring the important difference between managing and coaching. Most notably, Harvard Business Review collected over 500,000 data points over the course of 10 years and kind of revealed this link between effective coaching and all kinds of things, productivity, employee commitment, and so on. Yet, when you look at data from the real world, it suggests that more managers are inclined to just manage and focus on assigning tasks and giving orders rather than taking the time to learn to be a coach. And being a coach isn't something all people intuitively just know how to do. It's a learned skill that involves providing more of a partnership with guiding employees to learn to fish for themselves. It requires patience and an understanding of the employee's motivations and skill and knowledge gaps in order to determine how they can best be supported.
Precisely. In fact, one of the foundational areas that we identified as crucial for coaching and enhancing overall manager empowerment is empathic leadership. The chart that you see here shows responses to the question, I feel seen and understood as a person by my manager. And as you can see, this chart depicts one of the most powerful relationships we've seen so far, with 2/3 of those who would recommend their manager strongly agreeing with that statement, compared to just 5% of those who do not recommend their manager. These striking results demonstrate the critical importance of managers taking time to truly know their team members as individuals, to ensure that they feel understood on a personal level. Now, we know that this may seem especially challenging for managers who have a large number of direct reports, but there's simply no denying these results. We need to be known as individuals, as unique human beings, if we're to be truly engaged.
Yeah, and also the study found that 90% of respondents who recommended their managers also had reported this strong sense of belonging. And I would say over the last 8 months, we've seen a notable uptick in the amount of senior leaders who are kind of seeking solutions to foster that high level belonging within their organizations. And although there's no silver bullet or one size fits all playbook to cultivating belonging and empowering managers to be empathetic leaders, one solution we've actually seen in the market is to complement manager one on ones with some type of employee listening technology. So employees have a safe space to be totally candid with their experiences. Although manager one-on-ones are like absolutely critical, the Workforce Institute's 2020 culture report showed that 77% of employees claim they'd be more honest in a survey than a conversation with their manager. And whether we like it or not, remote work will continue to be normalized. The work and the world that we live in is increasingly digital, and more people are inclined to speak their truth when they're behind the comfort of a screen. And so, one of our products, a lot of our customers have been getting a lot of value out of since the pandemic, is this daily check ins tool that we offer that's this kind of anonymous way for employees to share how they're doing so managers can get real time visibility that might be impacting their team's well-being or performance, so they can kind of address issues before they snowball, like being proactive instead of reactive. So if employee listening is an area of your business that you're thinking about enhancing, we're offering a totally free, no strings attached consultation with one of our partners, Gil Cohen, which provides a readiness assessment to see if it even makes sense for you to implement something like this. And it's time for key takeaways. Okay, we have covered a lot of content. I'm going to plop the link also for the Achievers Workforce Institute Manager Effectiveness Report in the chat. Feel free to check that out. Let us know what you think. And we're going to take some questions. But first, I'll ask Dr. Natalie to summarize. If someone were to file away only 3 points based off what we talked about, what would they be?
All right, well, okay, if you remember only 3 big ticket items from this session, these are those takeaways. First of all, training is key. Be sure to evaluate your current manager training program and then close any gaps necessary to ensure that you're empowering your leaders to deliver effectively on the 4 key areas that we've talked about today. Next, prioritize the development of a culture of recognition across your organization. Evaluate how often are your employees being meaningfully recognized, and then put a strategy in place to ensure that every individual, regardless of their role or their level, is receiving at least 1 meaningful recognition per month. And finally, consider setting your managers up for success with technology that provides them with team-specific data through pulse surveying and real-time continuous listening tools to ensure that they have a real-time understanding of what their team members need to be successful, which will allow them to take the right action today.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Natalie. I see Stacy was like, can we do a recap? Boom. We had it there for you. Okay, I think that we have time for some questions. And I've been looking at the Q&A panel, and Dr. Natalie, I'm going to direct our first one at you, if you don't mind, because I love this one. It is, the question is, I feel like our managers are already feeling strained. How can we empower them with this information without overwhelming them?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, in fact, our Achievers Workforce Institute 2020 Culture Report shows that managers have been feeling less supported than any other level of employee during the COVID pandemic. Now, we think that's likely the case because managers often find themselves torn between objectives, between the demands or the needs from those above them and those that to report to them. And then you add that to the fact that many managers likely have additional demands at home, and you have a deeply overwhelmed body of employees. So, I'd say given that reality, it's important to remember that we're not proposing that you add more to the plate of your managers, but rather that you ensure that you are empowering your managers with tools and resources to more powerfully execute on the drivers that they're already delivering to their team members. So while there may be an additional time demand that's associated with training or in order to understand the resource provided to them, that time invested, it's going to deliver tremendous benefit in the long run when you upskill your managers to drive that type of success.
Yes, I love that. Thank you, Dr. Natalie. Here's actually a quick one that we had from earlier that would be very easy for you to answer. The manager net promoter score, was that on a scale of 1 to 10, like a normal net promoter score, or how would we do that?
Yes, yes, it was. Yeah. Great
Nice.
question.
Cool. I think that we can squeeze in 1 or 2 more. Karen's like, I love the slide comparing manager to coach. I know, I love it too. So how about this one? When a company doesn't have budget to help with career growth, how do managers deal with helping motivate career development in that environment? Like when HR, that's a good question. Like when HR doesn't have the support of budget to put in robust programs in place, like what can be done to help motivate employees to get involved with their career development?
Yeah, I love that question because I think that in order for us to really be effective with these sorts of drivers and empower our managers, we have to keep it simple. And when we're talking about career development, we really can create a framework that any manager can deliver on, regardless of the resources or support provided to them, by understanding the top both personal and professional goals that their direct report is looking to achieve. And I usually keep things, I've learned over the last couple of decades, keep it really simple. So I look at what's, 2 or 3 at the very most goals that each of one's direct reports has, both on a professional level, like I'm going to work on public speaking. I want to attend, develop, create a certain, get a certificate in a certain area of expertise. Personal goals, could be that I'm going to, really establish better work-life balance Monday through Friday. And it looks like this. So getting, nailing what those are for each of one's direct reports is actually pretty straightforward, can be done within the context of, a one-on-one meeting. We talked about how, the great use of your one-on-one time. And then making sure that as a manager, you're regularly checking in on those goals and asking, if we go back to that agenda, we talked about asking what's working, what's not, what can I do to help? And in my experience, that's a really effective method to tackle this one.
100%. Managers just bringing up career development regularly is like probably the lowest hanging fruit with moving the needle. But also, one thing I've seen very effective is involving executives, sending like a very simple message from like your CEO or whoever, being like, hey, our people are our most important asset. Your growth means everything to us. And just encouraging employees to take the reins and be in the driver's seat of their own careers. If you just type into Dr. Google, like career development plans, like there's so many free ones available that like you don't have to pay for. So I think it's really about just setting those expectations with managers, setting the expectations with employees that, hey, you're in the driver's seat of your growth, and then getting your executives involved. Like that doesn't cost any money to tell them you're important to us. Oh goodness, we're running out of time. We have a couple of important things to talk about before we close out. First of all, please feel free to connect with Natalie and I on LinkedIn. We would absolutely love to know what you thought of the program today. And a huge, huge shout out to the beauty and the brains behind the Workforce Institute and the report, Dr. Natalie. It's always such a pleasure.
Likewise, right back at you, Brie, and thank you also to you for all of your the way in which you bring in your experience being inside the organization to speak to all of the topics that we're talking about, particularly in this manager empowerment area, and to Caitlin Nobes, who's behind the scenes and always helping us, making sure we have the right information at the tips of our fingers and putting them into a stunning deck for us as usual.
Yes, and now it's back over to our friend Nick.
Hi guys, I hope you guys can see me there. Thanks again so much. Speaking of recognition, I would like to thank you in the audience so much for joining us today, as well as our speakers, Natalie and Brie, and our sponsor, Achievers. In addition to the April 1st webinar that Brie was talking about a little earlier, you're also invited to tune in again on Tuesday, March 9th. Natalie and Brie will be presenting their findings on engagement and retention trends for 2021. That research is based on a survey this month of about 2,000 employees. So thank you so much to you, our From Day One audience members. We look forward to bringing you some more engaging webinars and virtual conferences through this year. If you'd like to join us for more events, for example, our conference on creating a culture of purpose amid uncertainty is coming up on February 17th. We have many more. We have a piece of content almost twice a week at this point, or sometimes even more. You can head to our website. That's fromday1.co, fromdayone.co, and you'll see the schedule for the coming months all the way through the end of the year. So thanks again for joining us today. Hope to see you in the future, and stay safe out there. Thanks, guys.